You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Matt McGachy, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians. We talk all about their lives and music while sharing killer craft beers. If you've ever wanted to sneak backstage and share a beer with one of your favorite musicians, well, Vox and Hops is the podcast for you. This week on the podcast, I dropped a killer episode with Kelly Schaefer of Atheist. There is this episode and over 440 other ones to help you enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. So what are you waiting for? It's time to become a Vox and Hops head. Cheers.
Do you like podcasts that talk about guitar gear? Of course you do. That's why you're here. Well, you're in luck because this episode is the most gear-filled episode of the Tone Mob podcast that I have recorded in quite some time. And of course it is because I'm recording it with my friend, Mr. Matt Knight from the Guitar Nerds podcast. It's been a long time since he's been on. Way too long. This dude is a treasure. He is a treasure in the gear industry. He is one of the hosts of one of the longest running guitar podcasts on the planet. And while he is not a spokesperson for Boss or Roland, he is one of the most enthusiastic people ever to work at the company. I'm sure. I've not met everyone that works there, of course. I'm just speaking from personal experience here. But Matt is an OG Boss fan, and he's been there for several years now. We talk about all of that. This is a fantastic episode. We just basically nerd out the whole time, not just about Boss stuff, but about gear in general. And I really had a great time talking to Matt, but I always do. Him and I just really click for whatever reason. We're like brothers from another mother, or whatever you call it. Anyhow, if you're here for gear, you are super going to enjoy this episode. And if you're here for just two old chums catching up, you're also going to enjoy this episode because that's a lot of what's going on here. It's gear talk. It's nerd talk. It is wonderful. I so enjoyed catching up with Matt, and I think you're going to enjoy this conversation as well. One small, tiny bit of business to get out of the way before we get into this. We have something pretty cool brewing over in the Gun Street world. So Gun Street Wiring, has been a supporter of this podcast for a long time. If you heard the episode with Scott, Sean, and I, you know that there's a Stringjoy Gun Street kind of merger thing that happened. We go into detail on it on that episode, which I will link in the show notes for anybody that is curious about that. And this is the first time you're hearing about it, blah, 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 blah. Anyhow, there's something really cool coming out, something that is cool to me personally, that I have some personal involvement in. And I think you're going to want to stay tuned to all things Gun Street this week because, well, there's something really rad happening. So stay tuned. I can't say too much about it as this episode drops, but I didn't want it to be late. So just stay tuned to the Gun Street socials, mailing list, all that stuff this week, and you will be hip to something really exciting for me personally. So anyway, without further ado, let's get into this episode with Mr. Matt Knight. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Tone Mob Podcast, the show about guitar stuff, occasionally, sometimes. I'm your host, Blake Weiland, and with me today, I have returning Mr. Matt Knight. It's been years since you've been on the podcast, and we're going to pretend like we didn't just talk for an hour.
I knew that would be the case, but, we've been riffing, and it's just been a long time. I mean, I haven't seen you face-to-face since NAMM 2020.
Mm-hmm.
You and I've been watching the 60 Cycle Hum podcast and stuff a lot more recently, and just go, oh man, just miss hanging out with my friends.
I know. I so badly want to get to the UK still, and I had some plans to do it, in 2020, which obviously did not happen. So one of these days we'll get that figured out.
It's mad, isn't it? I have been abroad since the whole all of the stuff that happened over the last few years, but for work, I haven't actually been on a proper holiday overseas for since 20 19, I guess.
Yeah.
Actually, saying that, I did go on a cruise earlier this year, so technically I did set foot in another country, but I spent most of the time on a boat.
Yes.
But no, it's good to be back. It's good to be back.
It's been so long since you've actually been on the episode. I remember I was actually on the other side of the room, sitting in a completely different place. Everything was arranged completely differently. I remember the last time we recorded pretty well. And you actually hadn't been working at Boss. It'd been a little while, but it hadn't been. You weren't as established as you are now. I don't even think you were in the same role at the time.
No, I mean, correctly. This is my seventh year. My 7th year at Roland, and my 20th year in this industry, I guess. Whoa. Pretty much since I was 16. So it's been good. I'm glad I'm still here because I have no idea what I'd be doing otherwise.
I feel that, and I've only been in this industry for about. Actually, yesterday was my 5th year being fully self-employed in this business. Has it been
that long?
Yeah, which is wild. And then
I remember you were taking the jump. Or we were talking quite a lot, obviously, cross NAMs and summer NAMs, and I think I remember you saying you were sort of taking the jump, but really that long, 5 years. Wow.
Yeah, 5 years, and it's I think 8-ish years that I've been in this industry, and so, but it feels like a complete other life. I guess it was a complete other life, but I similarly can't imagine what else I would do now.
I know.
It's so weird.
I do think, I was talking to Joe, Guitar Nerds Joe, yesterday, and I was thinking back to, we were talking about guitars, as we normally do, but talking about specifically about selling high-end guitars and limited edition stuff. And you think how much social media and YouTube has changed the way that we buy pedals or guitars. I mean, the only person I can remember ever watching really that ever had videos on gear, you'd be like, that's cool, that's new, was Andy. It was like you had that, and that was it. That was your source of truth. That's all you had for gear. And it's like now it's like it's everywhere,
everywhere.
And I guess that's why NAMM was always so special and always so popular for every other year. I mean, I must admit, it must have been so cool to have been at some of the NAMMs, in the 80s or whatever, especially when the first Ibanez Gem was revealed, or the first time that, Kramer announced they had Eddie Van Halen as an artist. You can't imagine being there and being like, I'm actually here, I'm actually seeing it. And that would have taken months for that news to kind of spread everywhere else, to be in magazines or whatever. So you sort of just forget how much stuff has changed in those last 5 years, with all the how quickly you can look at a new pedal and then the next day something else has come out and you're like, oh, I'm over here now. Forgotten about that one already. So
I mean, doing Chasing Tone, we literally have, it's not always this way, but fairly consistently, we always have news topics to talk about. Usually it's a gear release, but sometimes it is just like, oh, this old guitarist said something silly. I guess we'll talk about it, but there's almost always news to talk about every single week. And that's, I think, also changed not only the speed of information traveling, but the volume of things to talk about has increased exponentially as more and more people have gotten into making stuff.
And I think the great thing is, as well, is it has, that level of competition spurs people on to do bigger and better things. I think not just from a gear perspective, but from a player's perspective as well. When I first started playing, there wasn't YouTube tutorials or anything like that. You couldn't watch other people play unless you actually went and physically watched other people play, or you're watching Kerrang or MTV or whatever, and now it's like you see, kids that are 15, 16, shredding guitar, doing all this crazy stuff, and it's just man, that following. And I think the way that people then learn off those people and then develop their own thing, and then that pushes things forward, because it's almost like I almost think of it as, they say that the power of computing doubles every 10 years. Is that what it is? Or every 5 years?
I think it's 5. Yeah, it's
and it's
something.
like, and how that compounds into this like singularity of just like everything just changes every single day. And I kind of feel that with guitar. It's like we've gone from, for me, my guitar heroes growing up was like, John Frusciante and Tom Morello and Johnny Greenwood and this kind of like real rock and roll playing, to like Tim Henson in like 20 years. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, how do we go from E pentatonic to like, what the hell is this person doing on like this custom Ibanez classical? I'm like, where are we going to be in like another 5 years time with playing? Like, someone's going to come out who's going to be even better than that person, or have even more followers than that person. And I'm just like, where do you take it? Or does it go completely back the other way, and someone goes, no, 3 notes, that's all you need, and we're straight back at BB King. And that's it. I don't know.
I don't know. I think there's always going to be, what I like about music in general, like the music world as a whole right now, is that everything is so fractured that there's more opportunity now for weirdos to actually make a living in one way or another. Now, I'm not saying that it's better or worse necessarily than what, there's a lot of people who miss the good old days when you could sell records and actually make money. And I do understand yearning for those times, but think about how few people sold records and made money. Like, even then, the people that were doing it was a small handful of people that were able to do it. Now, like, really eclectic, weird musicians can cut through and actually make a living doing music. It may not be, a certain excessive rock star lifestyle that we've come to glamorize through our old 80s magazines and stuff.
Yeah.
But the fact that there can be somebody, screaming into their guitar pickups in their basement and making some sort of weird noise rock record, and somebody's actually going to hear it, that's insane. That's wild to me.
And I think I guess kind of leads into guitar pedals and where we are with guitar pedals, because you can make guitar pedals at home, and you can use 3D printers and source parts, and get really nice case designs done and do crazy stuff, and you can get that out there and people can see it and enjoy it, and you can build a following around that. And I just I always think back, when I first started working in stores, you bought Boss or Electro Harmonics or MXR, and now it's like, you can walk into a store, like, I used to work in Anderton's, and there's 1,000 different guitar pedals on the shelves. And I think it's great, because that's how you end up with Old Blood Noise and Chase Bliss, and if you think about JHS and Earthquaker and how far they've come in the last 10 years. But you can also go to a show and you can see, I remember talking to a chap, and I forget his name, but me and Joe were talking about on the podcast a few weeks ago, who started his own pedal company, Bleak District Effects. And he was doing this cool like fuzz micro looper, and it's like, I've just made it, invented it, and it looks professional. It doesn't look like someone's just hacked it together. Right. And he's out there and people are using it and talking about it. And sure, he might only have 1,000 followers on Instagram and not 1 million or whatever. But I think it's great that it is more fractured in that way, because again, that builds more competition. People are doing something. It's like, that's cool. I want to do the same thing. I want to find out how that works. I want to take it to the next level.
Well, you can see, Boss has a history of making cool, innovative things and, kickstarting the whole industry in a lot of ways. But I can kind of see, without knowing the internal workings, that all the craziness that has come out, all the Chase Bliss, the Old Bloods, the Earthquakers, the innovation that has happened in these smaller companies has clearly inspired some of the things that you guys do. Not that you're taking the ideas and running with them, but it's pushing Boss to do what Boss does on another level, I think, from outside looking in. Like, because you guys are releasing some insane things.
Yeah, I think
there's more to come.
Yeah, I think
foreshadowing.
maybe? I of course, can't be an official spokesperson for the brand, but I think, my experience of the last 7 years, and I'm sure I remember saying this on a talk with Boss that I did with Yoshi, when I first met him, I said, before I started working for the brand, I worked in a dealer at this point, and he'd just become Boss president. I think this was like 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'm the biggest Boss fan there is. I loved Boss pedals. That's all I lived for. And I said, but everyone thinks you're uncool. I don't. I'm still here. I'm fighting the fight, but so many people think Boss is uncool now. That was, really that sort of that creeping up of all these boutique pedals, and certainly, Strymon. We went from no one's going to spend $400 on a pedal to people coming in buying, I'll buy a Mobius, a Big Sky, and a Timeline all at the same time, and it's going to cost you $1,500. Like, that jump seemed like almost overnight. And all credit to Yoshi, things like the Wazacraft and pushing that thing forward and taking ideas and listening to people and doing stuff that's more innovation, but also doing things that people said that we never do, like look back on our history. We've not reissued things, but we've certainly kind of looked back and gone, actually, what could we do? How could we involve our heritage, but at the same time bring it into the modern day? And I think the SDE delay pedals that we just launched are a great example of that, because Yoshi was the original engineer. And, if you watch the YouTube videos that he put out where he's telling the story, when he designed that, it was very much a kind of birth of digital era. And then he sort of looked back on it 40 years later and gone, yeah, it had a magic about it. Let's recreate that, but let's think about everything that we can do now without losing that charm. And I feel that like 7-8 years ago, we would have never done that. And I still, one of my biggest, most favorite things that we've ever done is the DC2 Dimension, the Waza.
Oh, yeah.
Because when I started and we were talking about Waza, he said, what would the next Waza be? And I was like, DC2, coolest pedal we've ever done. And he sort of laughed. And then, we were talking about it before, and then one day they were like, yeah, we're gonna do it. And I was like, unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so it's things like that, I think, where perhaps, having more influence from other people inside the business and having really enthusiastic product managers like myself who have tuned into what else is happening and feeding that in, and the excitement of what else is happening in the world, and just being along with it. I think we've always made great stuff, but I always think back to like the 2000s. The early 2000s always felt like a really dead time for lots of things, music, especially, especially in the UK. It was very much that sort of second wave of like, I guess what you would say in America is like EDM, but like kind of plain Ibiza dance music, and guitar wasn't really a thing, and it was sort of dying in guitar pedals. And we had some cool stuff, but we also like innovated a lot in terms of technology, but those things sort of got forgotten. And then, as we've moved forward, we've sort of looked back on some of that. But yeah, it's been the last 7 years, to me, I think, even from an outsider looking in, like Boss has had a wild ride, I think.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's funny. I want to touch on a couple of those points, but specifically the early 2000s, that's the time I look back on in America, at least, like with such fondness, because that's when I was growing up. That's when I discovered punk and hardcore and screamo and emo, and all that stuff was really getting huge during that time. That's when I truly fell in love with guitar, was at that point. And I don't know if that was maybe less of a thing in the UK, or if it was just the circles you ran in, that type of thing, or what. But to me, that was a time that solidified, at least in America, a lot of current guitar players. I know a lot of the listeners of this show are about the same age and really resonate with when I get those type of bands on the podcast to get to do interviews with some of my old musical heroes. It's like the special moments for me. But like those are the times I look back on as like 2000 to 2014, or not 14, but like 2010 or 11, as like with a lot of nostalgia. And guitar is forefront in that for me. So it's kind of was it not like that in the UK?
I think so.
I mean, that's when Architects came up, right? It was about 2000.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, the big bands for me really at that time were. I mean, I was just massively into the Red Hot Chili Peppers, like that to me. Like, and John Frusciante had like especially when he kind of went to By the Way, had like the biggest pedal board out of like all the guitar players, and that's all I cared. That's all I cared about, and certainly then getting into Radiohead and all of the cool stuff that like Tom Morello was doing. I was like a massive new metal kid, I guess. So all of that stuff around that point, and then getting into like Incubus and Mike Onzinger, and again, like pedals drove me more than guitars at that point, I guess. I just loved the idea of like all of this stuff. And actually, to be fair, we had quite a few strong releases, which I'm looking at. I guess anyone listening, if you was in front of a computer, you could pull this up. But on the Roland website, if you put history of Boss compact pedals, there's a great timeline that one of my colleagues did way before I started. Went up to NAMM 2013, which is when we launched our 100th compact pedal. Wow. And if you look at the timeline between 2000 2010, we made. I remember buying these two pedals probably around that same year, but MD2, the Mega Distortion, and the BF3 Flanger, we still make them now. And you just think, wait, they're 21 years old. I'm like, how is that possible? YouTube is, and it's crazy because it also has some like iconic moments in time, but YouTube was launched in 2009.
Right. Wow.
It's and I think it comes back to that, like, you had to go to your guitar shop to find out what was not even what was new. It's just like, oh, can I try a flanger pedal? And they're like, yeah, we basically stock a Boss one. You're like, great. Boss is great. That's the only thing I can see. But I certainly think for me, like once you get past that point, like 2010, like there's a few pedals that I think people sort of forgot about, a few pedals that we still make now. But then we had things like the TE2. Yeah, that was our 100th leather compact in 2013. And I think that is our biggest hidden gem. I think if you launch that now, more people would look upon that pedal more favorably because it does something a bit more out of the ordinary. And I think at the time, like 10 years ago, people were like, what am I ever going to use this for? And it's like,
this is the
now
Terra Echo, right?
Loads, the Terra Echo. Now loads of people would create great music using that pedal. We still make it. And I just think, that was a pedal that was realistically was just too ahead of its time. And I think personally, I think we've had quite a few of those over the years. But that strikes me as one of the last compacts. So I'm like, that's definitely. I think if you launch that now, people will be like, "This is super cool."
Maybe that's what you need to do. You don't need to necessarily launch it, but you need to like put a push behind it, because that is one that has came up. At the end of every episode, I always ask, what is your favorite Boss pedal? And that pedal has came up a few times, and people do view it as kind of a sleeper in the lineup. And there's no reason it needs to be, because it's great.
And I mean, even things like the flanger, like the BF3, I remember I had that on like layaway, so I went in like every week, and I used to cut grass with my granddad, and then I used to get like, £10, whatever. I used to go in over the course of a few months, like basically paid a bit off, and I get this flanger home, and it had like step flanger and all this crazy stuff, and I'm like, there's nothing that did anything. The closest thing was to a flanger I tried before was an Electric Mistress, and it's this huge metal box, and it did like one sound. Then you're like, this does all of these other sounds. And then I also think we were talking about this on the Guitar Nerds podcast, but if you just go on to Reverb now and you look at the price of some of the Boss pedals that have been discontinued in the last 10 years, how much money they're going for. And you've realized that, some of these things just fly under the radar. And then everyone's like, when it's gone, everyone's like, oh, that was cool. Now I'm going to buy one. And now everyone wants one.
Oh, man. It happens with everything. With any brand that is of note. If you discontinue something, the price goes up. I remember buying the Chase Bliss Spectre, which is a really wild pedal, and it's not without its. Some people don't like how noisy it is, and I understand that, but I use it with so much fuzz that anything's going to be noisy. Doesn't matter. But I remember buying that on discount when PGS was going out of business, basically. Well, they didn't go out of business; they were bought, and their inventory was liquidated. But I bought it for like $270 or something, and I love that pedal. I think it's kind of it's a weird one, and it takes a little bit to get your head around, but I absolutely love that pedal. But when I was seeing them go for between, some people were asking $1,000 for them, and it was simply because it didn't exist anymore. There's no other reason for it. It's not, if Joel could have sold it for $1,000, I don't think he even would have, because it's not in his spirit to do so. But it's just wild how like nobody wanted that pedal, and that's why it got blown out. And then all of a sudden it's gone. Now it's $1,000.
Yeah, I know, and that's why I try not to sell anything. And I've because I've definitely had stuff where I'm like, I shouldn't have sold that because I know it's going to be worth a bunch of money. It's like I'm sort of I think you're the same with the Ibanez 7 series, right? Like you've got all of those now.
Almost all of them. Yeah, not quite.
And you get to that point where getting a complete collection is super difficult because there's one that just is way more expensive than all of the other ones.
The lo-fi. The lo-fi is the really expensive one out of that. And I got really lucky, and my friend Jess sold it to me for what he paid for it. So,
because I remember there was a great guy that used to work with when I was at GAC in Brighton, and he used one. And he was like, yeah, it just makes everything sound terrible. And I was like, why would you want everything to sound terrible? And it's like, we're now in the era of guitar pedals that are specifically designed to make your guitar sound. Terrible is the wrong word, but, incredibly lo-fi.
Yeah.
And then, like you say, now they're just like crazy money. I mean, when I did the complete Dan Electro like food series, that was at a point where some of them, certainly the PB&J delay and the Rocky Road rotary speaker, people were starting to get, 75, 80 pounds for it. And you're like, that's crazy. These like came in plastic containers and cost $20. But I think we are at that point where some of these pedals, certainly from our childhood, like everyone wants them. And now, and now the money's crazy. I mean, it's the same with, I've become a bit of I wouldn't say vinyl nut, because I'm not into like, all of the super, I don't know all of the labels and all the numbers and the pressings, and I haven't gone super deep. But, if I want vinyl from the records I listened to when I was 15 or 16, they're crazy money.
Mm-hmm.
Because they didn't make many, because 20 years ago, no one was buying vinyl. So why would you have bought one realistically at that point? And now they're crazy. I mean, I've got a copy, which I thankfully, because of a friend, paid nothing for, but I've got a copy of Deloused in the Comatorium from the Mars Volta, the first pressing. They didn't make many, and they were a brand new band at that point. That's like a 500 quid vinyl now. I was like, I really want what was I listening to the other day? I was like, I really want the first 3 Limp Bizkit records on vinyl. It's like, if you want to buy Chocolate Starfish on vinyl, that's going to cost you like 200 quid.
Is it really?
Like,
whoa.
Yeah, I'm like, is it worth it? I'm like, maybe.
Maybe. It might be.
But it's like, I mean, I was in a record store and Songs for the Deaf, Queens of the Stone Age, like 150 quid.
Wow.
Yeah, I can listen to it for free on Spotify, but I'm like, oh, it's cool to own the vinyl. And I think that's the same with pedals. Like, there's definitely things from my childhood now where that they are getting to that money. I think one of the pedals that stands out for me at that point is probably the Deluxe Memory Man.
Yes, I was going to say that same one. Yes.
Because I remember that was like the coolest looking delay, you know, the big box one. And they're like, I actually, the prices on those are fluctuating quite a lot at the moment because I think the bubbles almost burst a little bit on those. But even the other ones, like that came in the more solid box afterwards, like the Memory Man TT or the 1100, they're going for like crazy money. But the big box Deluxe Memory Man for me stands out as one of those pedals. It's just like, you know, they came in a crappy wooden box and they were always half broken and missing a power supply. And then they just sort of slowly got more and more because everyone's like, I remember that big pedal from when I was a kid and I want one of those. And everyone says they're really good. And, you know, it's like 700 quid for a pedal.
It's funny that you brought that up. I just sent you a meme I made the other day, which is great for podcasting. But you can go ahead and read that out for the audio only people.
Yeah. Me, when I find the person who spent all my money on music gear.
Okay, swipe to the next one.
Okay, hold on.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wait, hold on. I'm not on Instagram on my phone because I'm off social media.
Oh.
But it might load.
I can fix this for you. This is great podcasting. But it's relevant to our conversation. Here we go. I'll just send you the image.
While you're doing that, what is the one... What do you think the one thing is now that is going to be the next big thing? Do you think in the future?
I think anything that is based around advanced analog stuff.
Yeah.
You know, some of the the Thermae from Chase Bliss, I think will probably be one of those ones. I think that's got a lot of hype on it, but I think in several years, like there'll be some people who want the original Thermae. They want the original run of the Thermae because there's been some tweaks here and there, or the tonal recall, especially since I don't think they make the tonal recall anymore.
No, did they discontinue that? And then they focused just on the Thermae, right?
Mm-hmm. I think some of those things from this era, the ones that took analog technology and really advanced it, I think are going to be really sought after in years to come. Because no matter what, you show these things to a guitar player, especially when those first came out, and people just started salivating, you know, without even really knowing what it was. And I wonder if it might still have that same impact in the future because things are going more and more digital. And I don't necessarily think that's bad, but I think there's always going to be a certain subsect of people who want that analog experience, whether that's people who collect vinyl or people who like to play tube amps or whatever it is. I don't think any of that stuff is ever going to go away.
No.
And I think the stuff that can be easily or readily integrated into the digital world that also uses some of that old tech is probably going to remain valued by a lot of people.
Hi, I'm Vincent, and I'm here to talk about the Merit Mercury X. My dad's always going on and on about how cool Meris is. He really went off on one about the Mercury X the other day. He said something about a 4,800 hertz sample rate and 99 preset locations and 33 banks, and something along the lines of the most advanced reverb pedal ever devised by man? That's all true, but I only care about one thing. This pedal sounds sick. So make sure you check out the Mercury X and all the other fine products at maris.us, as well as fine retailers worldwide. All right, Dad, now can I have my Pocky?
How exactly do artists get their music on Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, Tidal, all these services? How in the world do you get your music there? Well, in the past, you had to use something called a record label. But these days, you can use DistroKid. DistroKid is the absolute easiest way to get your music up on streaming services, and it's the most affordable way to do so. Not only do plans start at $22.99 for the entire year, that's less than $2 a month, DistroKid also does not take a cut of your streaming revenue, unlike some other services out there. Even better if you sign up by going to tonemob.com/distrokid. That's tonemob.com/distrokid. One more time, that's tonemob.com/distrokid. You'll get 30% off. That's right, 30% off their already extremely reasonable prices. So go to tonemob.com/distrokid and get your music out there.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because I think, like you were saying about how fractured music is, which is a great thing in some respects because it allows lots of people to get their voice out there, whether they're getting 1 million downloads or 1,000 downloads. Like it creates more subgenres of music, and more people can listen to things and find new experiences. And it's the same with pedals. There's lots of different fractures of pedals and lots of people making pedal companies, but in some ways it adds lots of those have little future value because there's so much out there. So it's harder to understand or think about what is going to have the most future value. I mean, it's always like when I worked in guitar stores, everyone was like, what guitar could I buy now that would be worth a fortune in the future? And I was like, well, if I knew that, I would have already bought it. So, but then, as I was saying to Joe a few weeks ago, who would have thought that you could have bought an American Standard Strat in 2000 and it's be worth more money, only by a few £100s, but more money than you paid for it in 2000.
Right.
You've literally probably played it for thousands of hours and you've lost no money on it. So I think that's amazing, but I think that is definitely going to be harder in today's pedal world, purely because I think there's less things that are stadium fillers versus the guys making great stuff, but only a few people are hearing it, perhaps.
That's true. And pedals are they suffer from the same thing that strings do. And this is something it's a little easier, but you look up a stage and you see somebody playing a guitar and you see it. You can see somebody playing a guitar, right? And so you can immediately have an attraction or not to that instrument. It's like, so how many Les Pauls did Jimmy Page sell? Millions. Millions of them. How many Stratocasters did Hendrix sell? Millions of them. Because you could see them playing it. And that elicits a response. I mean, even in the last few years, the answer to that person's question is what guitar can I buy that's going to be worth a lot in a few years? It's like, okay, whatever the most popular rock artist of the time decides to play next, basically, is the answer. So it could be anything.
Absolutely.
So I've told this story before, but I bought my Les Paul Custom. It's an 81. I bought it probably 6 years ago or so, and I paid $2,100 for it, which was about fair market price at the time. And along comes this fella named Adam Jones, and releases the Custom Shop 79 Silver Burst Les Paul Custom. And I don't remember what they were going for initially. I want to say they were something like $7 or $8 grand, or maybe a little bit more. And then overnight, every Les Paul Custom from 78 to 83 just skyrockets in price. The white ones, like I have a little less so, but anybody that had a Silver Burst, those things instantly they were asking $10,000-$12,000 for them.
It's mad, isn't it? Absolutely crazy.
But even mine, the white one, which is not the Adam Jones one, still got inflated. Those things I saw an 82 and an 83 side by side in a shop the other day. They were both over $6.5 grand. And I was like,
madness.
I love that guitar, but there's no way that I'm buying it for $6.5 grand. I'm not. So I got lucky on that one.
Yeah, and I guess in some ways that you could say pedals, things like rig rundowns and being able to see what people use, because if you're standing on stage, you can't see what pedals people are using. If you're watching someone in a stadium or a big gig, like you're never gonna you're never going to see. And I guess, like you say, it's the same thing with strings. You need people to talk about it, you need people to show it off. And I think it's definitely where someone pulls something out of the bag and you're like, and they're really popular. That's when those things definitely rocket.
Mhm.
But then again, like, you know, one thing that strikes me as crazy in terms of price, I don't know. I mean, how big are Origin effects in the US? Are they sort of...
they have their how should I say this? They have their home runs, right? Everybody wants a slide rig. Everybody wants the Cali 76. But even that, some of that's influenced by whatever. Like, a lot of people want the big box Cali 76.
Well, that's the thing, because I was going to say, like, you know, I think they make some great pedals, and, you know, they're expensive, but they're well manufactured and well machined. But
this DCX boost I just got is blowing my mind. I'm absolutely in love with it. But that's a story for another time.
I need to get hold of one of those. But those original Cali 76s, they're like over $1,000 secondhand, and I'm like, I don't know where that came from. Like, is it just that people want those really early ones because now they're, you know, now that they're more established, everyone's like, oh, well, I could play a modern slide rig, but actually what I want is this totally impractical, massive one.
There's some sort of X factor with certain things, right? Like, I have a like transition era big box Russian Big Muff. It's like the era in between when the box was still giant, but they hadn't gone to the slightly smaller black box yet.
Yeah.
You know, it's right in that in between the official green and the new smaller black box.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that pedal, and it gives me great joy to just pick it up and look at it, and then it sounds incredible and I plug it in. But I would never take it to a gig. It's too finicky. Like, it's too I'm like, I don't know. No. But there's something really cool about having that giant impractical metal box. I have a few actual tape delay units that are huge. One's huge, one's not huge, but they're both finicky and impractical. I would never take them to a gig, but there's something about having some of this stuff that just makes me happy, even though it makes absolutely no sense.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've used the Deluxe Memory Man for years, and I've just taken it off my board and replaced it with the SD 3000. It's sort of become my main guitar pedal. I'm like, I love it, but I've always had it in a loop switcher because if I step on it, it will die.
Right.
And I've also got one of the V1 series Electro-Harmonix Holy Grails. Again, because Frusciante fan, and every time I plug it in, if it doesn't have its own power supply, it really squeals, and sometimes the switch doesn't work, and I'm like, oh, just look at it. That's fine.
That's fine. It's beautiful. Look at it.
You know, and I've got a few of those things where you just like, yeah, I like having it, but it's too impractical. It's just too impractical.
I do think some of the Origin stuff, and I don't know if this is 100% accurate, I think some of the drivers of the big box Origin stuff is that those got popular because they were used by certain people. You know, like Jason Isbell's really popular over here, and he famously has a slide rig, I think. And I believe it's a big box, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
You know, so sometimes all it takes is somebody that people respect, whether they're right or not, saying that one's better than the others. You know, even if they're identical. If somebody that you musically look up to and respect says, I think this pedal's better, you're like, well, I guess it is. You're you, and I'm me, so you must be right.
And I think, you know, and I think that is the thing, and I think that's the glorious thing about it all, because, you know, I want an Electro-Harmonix 16-second delay. Not because you know I need another looper or delay pedal in my life, but it's because the people who have used it, and you watch, what is his name? Escape me.
Nils Klein.
Yeah, Nils Klein use it, and you're like, oh yeah, why wouldn't I have one? You know, and that's why they're like $800. You know, it's like they didn't make that many. They weren't very popular, but you see someone using it, you're like, yeah, I could do that with something else probably, but it's not as cool as having the
I
actual
can't
thing.
put my elbow on the sliders with anything else. That's the only thing I can put my elbow on the sliders like Nels Cline does.
Yeah.
So yeah,
every time
I have the reissue, and so this is how dumb I am. I have the reissue that came out sometime in the, I think, early 2000s of the 16-second digital delay.
Yeah.
And because I'm an idiot, I want the original one. But I have the reissue that does the same thing. Actually, it does it easier and better in some ways, but I still kind of want the original.
I mean, even their reissues are so hard to get hold of. So hard to get hold of.
I didn't know that when I got it. It's another one I got very lucky on. I just happened upon it in a shop, and I was like, "That's the thing that Nels Cline uses," and bought it.
Yeah, so. It's that's definitely one on the list. But the thing that I've been, I'm also a firm believer. If you want something like that, the best thing to do is wait, because the universe, in its crazy and twisted ways, always brings those things to you at the right time for the right price. Because eventually, like if you've watched eBay or Reverb, or I guess you guys have Craigslist, long enough, like something comes up at like an unbelievable price because someone either doesn't know what it is, or they're just like, look, I just need to sell it, rather than jumping on the first one that you see, and they eventually come up. But sometimes you have to wait a long time. But I've been doing the same thing with the big box Moog pedals, because a few years ago I had the Freak box, which is their oscillator and the ring modulator. Sold them both, wasn't using them, too massive and impractical, and then tripled in price in the last,
because they stopped making them.
Because they stopped making them, and no one's realistically using them anymore.
No,
but I've been slowly picking them off, but they're fluctuating in price. But the delay is, to get the complete collection, the delay is the one that stalls you from getting the complete collection.
Yep.
Because I follow quite a lot of like retro gamers. People are like, oh right, I want a complete inbox PlayStation 2 collection, and it's like one game from Japan that costs like $3,000, and you're like, well, I'm just never going to get. I was like, I might have spent $50,000 getting every single other one, but it's like $3,000 in one go is just too much. And it's like that big box Moog delay, they're like $1,600.
I remember
over $2,000.
Almost bought one of those so many times, and I'm sure there's millions of other guitar players that have the same story. But like I've heard a million times, I remember hearing it from Paul Reed Smith, and now having been in business for a little while, I totally understand this in a way that I didn't when I was just more of a consumer. If people were buying them, they wouldn't have discontinued them, right? Paul was asked in an interview that I was kind of a part of why they stopped making XYZ guitar, and he was like, because you guys quit buying it. Like if it was selling, we'd continue to make it. Like, so obviously Moog either sales weren't where they needed to be, or they couldn't get parts, or some combination of all of it. Obviously sometimes we don't know what we want until we can't get it, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sort of as we're talking, and I've got you on a separate screen. I've got Reverb in front of me, and I think you're lucky that the hard thing for us buying gear in the UK is that we kind of really need to buy it within the UK because of the import taxes. Like once you ship anywhere else, where it's obviously you've got a much bigger place in the US, and I'm sort of going from most expensive to least expensive in terms of guitar pedals. And there's the trend with things that are really expensive is they're also massive. Like physically in terms of size, everything that is over $1,500 is just huge.
What do we got? What are you looking at?
So obviously there's a lot of Space Echoes on there. I don't know if you can really count that. Obviously they are massive, but it's clones, a lot of clones. Obviously super big. Binsons, again, tape echoes, they're kind of expensive. There's a lot of clones for sale in in America, and they're all crazy prices. Then you've got things like old fuzzes, like zonk machines, fuzz faces. Like you can buy those kind of things in smaller, more practical boxes these days. Rack units, we won't count rack units. Old Univibes, again, massive.
Huge.
Old Way Huge, couple of Way Huge pedals. Again, the old ones, massive.
Mm-hmm.
What else have we got here? Mutron pedals, massive. Love Tone pedals. Moog pedals. So it's all that kind of stuff. And you're like, maybe it's just people making pedals that are too big. Pete Cornish.
Pete Cornish, again, huge.
You know, I mean, again, it's difficult because sometimes you look at those and go, are they actually selling for that much money?
I will say, I bought a Roger Mayer Octavia in the rocket enclosure. I bought that only because it was in a rocket enclosure. It's huge. It's completely impractical. It makes absolutely no sense to put on a pedal board. But you know what? It's in a spaceship, and it's cool looking. And and it sounds really gnarly. So
why do people own a Benson Chase Bliss preamp, or like me, have a CXM 78? It's like, because it's cool. Like I definitely went through a phase of like, no, pedal boards need to be practical, and I want everything to look really uniform. And now I'm like, no, if it's the right pedal and it sounds good, I'm just gonna shoehorn it in there, even if it is massive. Like I could definitely probably put more pedals on my pedal board if I had more practical pedals. But I'm like, that's not what I want. That's not what I want. I have actually got a pedal board tucked away that I wired up, which has got 3 Moog pedals and the control processor on it.
Yeah.
And it just sounds... The crazy thing with that is because the Freak Box is an oscillator, and then you've got a low-pass filter and a ring modulator, you can basically patch it into itself.
Mm-hmm. And
it just makes noise. So you're like, I don't even need to play guitar. I can just get it to make its own noise and then just walk away. And it is like modular synthesis for guitar, which is great. But I think the one thing that I definitely miss, and this is what I miss about coming to the US, and something I'd love to do next time I was there, is like, we just don't have the kind of pawn shop kind of thing that you guys have over there, and like hunting for gear in lots of those places. Like we just don't have that. Like we have pawn shops, but they're crappy.
That's not crappy. That's not as much as it used to be, because now with the one of the downsides of the internet is all those people pretty much know what things cost now.
Yeah.
So they you can't find those deals quite like you used to be able to. Though listener Paul Marsh, shout out Paul, he's a supporter of the show. He sent me a great deal that he got. I can't remember exactly what the price was, but it was a Analog Man modded GE7,
right.
And they priced it as a normal GE7, which is not what they go for on Reverb if you have an Analog Man modded one.
Yeah,
they obviously just thought that the Analog Man was some random sticker that some kid put on there, but it's obviously Analog Mike, and everybody knows all about that if you're listening to this show. So he got a smoking deal on that, because G7s are not an expensive pedal on the used market. So we are brought to you today by Sweetwater, specifically the Gear Exchange. You may have heard about this. This is a place where you can go to buy and sell your used gear. Maybe you got a pedal over there that's just kind of collecting dust. Maybe there's something you've been eyeing from the Sweetwater catalog. Well, right now is a great time to turn that unused gear into something you're actually going to use. Even better, if you sell on the Gear Exchange, you can keep 100% of the sale as long as you choose a Sweetwater gift card as your payout method. That is not too shabby, because let's be honest, most of this buying and selling we do is just to fund new gear purchases, and that is a great way to reach a wide variety of customers and keep 100% in your pocket, or rather on your pedal board. So go check out the Sweetwater Gear Exchange and turn that unused gear into something that's actually going to help you write that next huge riff.
Hello there. I'd I'd like to introduce you to your new best friend, the Chase Bliss Audio Lossy. Lossy is a collaboration between Chase Bliss and Good Hertz. And it's meant to give you some control over those weird digital artifacts that come with very compressed audio. You're hearing it right now. All the changes that are taking place are strictly coming from my playing dynamics. I'm just interacting with the pedal and letting it do its thing. In some true stereo goodness. If you'd like some more details about Lossy, I'd invite you to head over to chaseblissaudio.com. I think you're gonna like what you find.
It's always the dream, isn't it, to like walk into somewhere and see something that someone had missed. Interesting story on a bit of gear that's not guitar related, but is synthesizer related. Someone that I work with, based in France. So we have like something called Gumtree, which is basically like the same as Craigslist.
Okay.
And he was on there, and there was this guy selling this really crappy drum kit, like a junk drum kit, basically, worth no money. But in the corner of the picture, there was the last few letters and number of the Roland Jupiter 6, which is the baby brother of the Jupiter 8, which is one of the most expensive Roland synthesizers you can buy. And he was like, that's definitely a Roland Jupiter 6. And this guy was listing this drum kit for like 50 euros. So he messaged him and went, just by any chance, in the background, is that a Roland Jupiter 6? And he was like, yes, why does everyone keep messaging me about this keyboard? Like, I'm trying to sell this drum kit. And he was like, I've had people offer me like all this sort of crazy money. I don't know what it is. And it sort of like angered this guy. He was like, I just want to get rid of this junk drum kit.
Wouldn't you, as that guy, go like, I wonder what a Roland Jupiter 6 is. I better Google it.
So eventually the guy, my guy was like, look, I'll be honest, it's this and this and this. And he was like, I'll be willing to come and take a look at it and tell you about it and then offer you a fair price. And they struck a deal, but it was one of those things where it's like the guy he was just clearing out his parents' house, and he was like, his dad had bought it in like 1984 or whatever, and then just it lived up there for ages. So there's always that dream find. That recently, one of the sort of vintage guitar stores in the UK had a like one single owner 59 Les Paul that had been in the case, and like the guy had only ever got it out on Sundays and he only ever played for half an hour and he wouldn't let anyone touch it. And you just go, and then you take it into a shop and they're like, oh yeah, we'll get like $500,000 for this, and you're just like,
whoa,
yeah. But it's just rare, isn't it? It's like you say, the internet. It's like we don't have garage sales over here, or garage sales as we would say. We have car boots, which it's kind of a similar thing, but people know, like if they've got a guitar, they're going to Google the name on the headstock and then go, I think this is expensive. So yeah, it's always good though when you do just see that one thing and you're like, but then the honest and good natured person in me, if I saw someone with what I believe to be a 59 Les Paul at a junk sale and he's selling it for $100, are you going to be like, there's going to be a part of you that's like, I want to take this for $100. There's also a part of you that's like, I should probably tell him how much money this is worth.
I know that is the dilemma, right? At some level, there's like the jerk part of me that's like, they have a cell phone, they can Google this too, but they chose not to. Therefore, I am going to go ahead and take this off their hand.
Yeah,
but I don't actually think I'd be able to do it. There's certain things I'd be able to do it with. You know what I mean? But a 59 Les Paul for most people is a life-changing amount of money.
Yeah.
And I don't think I could do that in good conscience. If it's somebody, selling I don't know, if they're selling a silver screw, OD1 or something, and they've got it for $150, I'll be like, sure, I'll get a good deal today. But I guess there's just levels to it, if that makes any sense. If I saw a Klon at a garage sale for $300, I'd be very tempted just to take it because, you could have Googled it. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'd say maybe Klon is the base level. So it's like, okay, Klon or bust. Like if it's worth more than what a Klon's worth and someone's selling it for $300, I'd be like, I'm definitely going to take that. Mm-hmm. Anything more than that, very difficult.
Very difficult. Yeah, I don't think I could do it. I think that is indeed the level for me. It'd be Klon. The good deal on a Klon, I'm taking it. 59 Les Paul, I'm going to have to say something.
Yeah.
I just have to,
But no, it's with pedals now as well. I'm just like coming back to that, not selling anything. I think, man, what have I got that could be worth? I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was clear. He's got a writing room in a studio. He's been there for like 20 years. He was clearing out a bunch of cabinets and drawers, and being someone that does a lot of like studio and session work, he just buys stuff all of the time.
Sure.
And he was just like pulled out a drawer. He's like, oh, Ibanez TS10. He's like, how much is this worth? And he's like, I think I bought this in 1990 for like, £50. And now it's like, I can get like £600 for it. So it's pretty mad to think that there could be something in your collection that, it's worth, or it's going up in value. I mean, I was amazed how much my 88 made in Japan Paisley Strat, like in really good condition, they're going for like nearly £2,500-3,000 now. And they're only going to keep going up because they're going to get harder to find. People are going to see how much they're worth. They're not going to be selling as many. They're going to hold on to it. Obviously choke the supply, and the demand's going to keep being there. So I think that's going to be. I mean, it's a 40-year-old guitar now, but I think they're going to be £4,000 or £5,000 in the next 10 years probably.
It's weird how this stuff goes. I just remembered, I've told this story on the podcast before, but my grandpa was probably one of the last people that this happened to, because the internet was just starting to explode about this time. He was watching Antiques Roadshow. Do you have Antiques Roadshow over there?
Oh, yeah. My dad watches it every Sunday.
Yeah. So Antiques Roadshow, this was like 2000, I don't know, 12, maybe 2011, right, somewhere in that ballpark. And on comes the guy with a guitar, and it's a 1950s Les Paul Jr. And they're like, "Oh, do you know how much this is worth?" "Oh, no." And at the time it was worth, around 10,000 or somewhere in that ballpark. And it kind of came down a little bit and then went back up. So it was somewhere in that ballpark. And he just looked at my grandma and was like, "I have one of those." She's like, "You do?" He's like, "Yeah, that's what that guitar is in the closet." And he went out and got it. And the bridge was classically pulled forward, as those tend to do over time. And then he, called me about it, or I was over there doing something, and he's like, "Oh yeah, this happened, and this guitar, and it's worth this much." I'm like, "I didn't know you had a 55 Junior." He's like, yeah. And he had a 61 Champ and a 56 Champ too. So yeah, he had all these cool old vintage guitars. I took the guitar in and got it repaired for him and everything. When I brought it back to him, he's like, "Well, why don't you just keep it?" So yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? That's my 55 Junior back there. That was his guitar that he had for years, and there's pictures of him playing it and stuff. But yeah, it was like totally spurred on by Antiques Roadshow. He probably would have forgot that it was in his closet.
Yeah, and then you might have found it like another 20 years later, and then gone, "Oh my god, I'm rich."
Well, what was funny is he had after all this, he told me a story about him talking to one of my dad's friends about it. And, the finish is all checked, right? Which is great. And he was like, "Yeah, it's kind of, finish is kind of cracked. I'm thinking about having somebody re-spray it." And he was like, "No, don't do it. Don't do it." He's like, but it's cracked. It doesn't look that good. Like, do not refinish that guitar under any circumstances.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? It's like I remember going to it was like an antiques show or something like that, but like a really high end one. So my wife used to work on one, and they had like one of the first electric cars from like the early 1900s, and it was like a barn find, and it still had like all the leaves in it and stuff. And they're like, why aren't you doing it up? And they're like, because it's worth so much money now, it would be pointless because you spend all the money. I was like, people want the condition it is in, and it's that same thing. It's like, yeah, people don't want a brand new looking 60s Strat. They want to, feel and see the age on it, and it is bizarre. It is bizarre, but yeah, it is cool to think you can't change it. That is how it is, and it's worth less money if you do anything to it.
It's worth like significantly less if you refin a vintage guitar. It's crazy how much it's not crazy. I get it. I'd rather have an original finish too, but if from a practical standpoint, it's still the same guitar as long as you did a good job on the refin. But hey,
yeah,
us guitarists are, as we discussed, very impractical people.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I mean, that's the thing. I'm sort of not into the amp world of things, but I'd imagine it probably gets the same with amps. Like, people dive super nerdy into like, oh my God, you've changed these caps and this, that, and the other, and now it's worth no money.
Unfortunate thing with amps is you have to, or it doesn't work.
Well, yeah, yeah. I guess that's the thing, isn't it? It's like you've got to do it eventually. So I think finding something that's like unused is almost impossible, really.
Yeah, I just got a Silvertone Twin 12 here recently, and it's mostly original. It'd been gone through by a tech, and everything is in good shape for now, but at some point it's going to need some things replaced. But
yeah, it's one of those things that you want to stop turning on at some point, because you're just like, I just want it to live a life where I don't have to spend any money on it or do anything to it.
It sounds so good, though. I just love it. So I'm playing it all the time.
And I think, to be honest, that's the difficult thing with, really old pedals now. And certainly things like, some of the early Boss pedals, like the BF1 flanger, like some of the early Roland synths, and a lot of other things from that era. It's like the parts, they never thought those products would last. People would be using them 40 years on. And that's a lot of those things, those parts start to die. Like, I
was talking to Wampler about this. He said at some point the capacitors in those pedals will dry out and they just won't work anymore.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to replace some of those things if they want them to remain functional.
Yeah.
And the reality is those parts haven't been made in a very long time. So you're going to have to get something that is similar, but it won't be identical if you want that pedal to continue to function.
There will be a different thing. But yeah, that's why I guess you're seeing like a more digital technology. But like you say, I don't think it will ever die, because I think there will be always a hankering for that old school stuff. But I think the generation in which people lust after will change. I think as people now who are getting into guitar won't necessarily, because of the kind of guitarist they're into and the kind of technology around today, won't necessarily be going, I want a 59 Les Paul. I honestly think it will be different. It will be people like who are 10 now getting into Polyphia going, I can't afford a Tim Henson signature, and in 20 years they're like, I'm going to go back and buy that first edition Tim Henson guitar, and they're going to be 100%. Like crazy money.
Yep. And they're going to go, I want to use the vintage plugin that Tim Henson used to use.
Yeah, I've got to, it's like, again, like coming back to that sort of retro gamer thing, in some ways, I'm glad I'm not a retro gamer, because, you've got people out there, it's like, oh yeah, I've got like a Windows 95 machine that's never been connected to the internet. So, it runs a perfect, 2 meg RAM processor or whatever. So you can play your old PC games on it. It's like, yeah, I can't play an emulation. It's like an emulation is good enough. It's like, if it's not the same as playing the real thing. And it's like, you probably have people out there go, well, I've got to run a 2015 MacBook Pro so I can have the first, version of Neural DSP on it.
That's right. Because that's the OG. That's what all my Guitar Heroes use. That's what I'm going to use.
Yeah, exactly. So who knows? When we're doing this podcast again in 20 years' time, we shall review. Take it from there.
That's right. We will. Oh, it's going to be we're going to get you on way quicker than this last cycle. This was way too long.
Let's make it a more regular thing, and hopefully a trip out to America at some point soon is very much needed, and of course would want you out in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now that your strings are over here as well, you can come and see them in real shops.
That's right.
You've got a business reason to put it on the company expenses.
I'll talk to Scott about that later today when I tell him I'm going to just be using the Amex for this.
Yeah.
I'm just going to have to be okay with it.
I'm going to England. I wish I could do the same, but it's not as easy.
One of these days we'll make it happen. So
indeed.
So Matt, I can't remember your answers to the classic questions. It's been so long since you came on.
Nor can I.
And since your role is expanded and now you have a better understanding of the entire Boss lineup, I think it'll be fun to explore.
Okay,
hit me. So what is your favorite, as it sits right now, favorite Boss pedal?
I knew that question was going to come. And I was like, what is the answer to my favorite Boss pedal? I'll give you two answers. I will give you a current Boss pedal.
Okay.
And I will give you a vintage Boss pedal.
Fair enough.
For the corporate shill in me, and then the love of the vintage Boss. So my favorite current Boss pedal, and has been for a long time, is the VB2.
Mm-hmm.
The VB2W, I just think from a vibrato point of view, it's really simple. It sounds super sweet. I love that kind of neo soul kind of vibe, like very much like Tom Misch. I don't know how big he is in the US, but that kind of guitar sound, just love using it on everything. And it's all analog, and it was really one of the most misunderstood Boss pedals. I had the chance to buy an original one for basically nothing when I worked in a secondhand department in store, and I was like, oh yeah, I think Boss made them for a while. Like, I think eBay was people just started using eBay. They were like $50. I was like, oh, I'll give you like $30 for it. And the guy was like, I might as well just keep it. And obviously now, well, the story I will tell was when I did my first NAMM, and I don't know if you remember that. I think that was the first time we met in person. So this was NAMM 2017, and
that was your first NAMM.
I think that was my first NAMM. Yeah, so. Because I started in August 2016, we had every single compact in chronological order.
I remember that. Yep.
And the only one the US team didn't have was the VB2, because they couldn't find one. And then they found a guy in like San Diego that had one. He was like, I want $500 for it. And they're just like, okay. It's like, and they go for I can't remember the last time I saw one for sale secondhand. So I think the VB2 is great, and I would recommend anyone get one of those if you want a really cool modulation. My favorite vintage Boss pedal at the moment is the FT2 dynamic filter, which again was a Boss pedal that I think we only made for about 18 months. And it was the pedal on from the the touch wah. Do we make the touch wah then the filter? I can't remember, but it's a very mid-focused, very vocal auto wah, where you can change the filter cutoff and frequency. But it was also has a manual input that you can turn it into a wah pedal. But as an auto wah, it has the sound that I was searching for. And I've tried so many auto wahs try to do too many clever things. And I'm like, no, I want it to sound like basically, I wanted an auto wah that sounded like Frank Zappa.
Okay.
Frank Zappa uses he used a Systech harmonic energizer, quite a rare pedal from like the 70s, which was like an octave, a filter, and a fuzz all in one.
Whoa.
And I think someone made a reissue of them. I can't remember the name of the company. But that's the closest I've come to that. So you mix it with a fuzz and it just sounds wicked. So VB2W and FT2 dynamic filter are my two answers for that one.
I don't remember exactly what your answer was.
I have no idea what my answer was last time.
I maybe we weren't even asking, or there's someone else here. Maybe I wasn't even asking that question. It might have been that long ago, because that started around, I think, 115 or so. Right. When I started asking that question.
Have you tallied all the answers that have been given? I
a listener has been doing that, and I haven't had contact with him in a little while, but I'm pretty sure that he got all the way back. So, wow. Yeah, he sent me a photo. He was literally writing them down on a piece of paper. So I need to get with him and see if he was able to complete that or not. Because
I would be interested to see, what the outcome of that.
Lots of TU2. I can tell you that. Yeah, lots of TU2.
That's definitely the safe answer.
Lots of the PS3 and PS6. That's pretty common.
I was going to say PS3. I've got a PS3 here.
That might have been what you said, actually, now that I think about it.
Yeah, maybe.
I
mean, I've got a lot of old Boss pedals here, and it's difficult to pick one, but that's the one that I'm enjoying the most right now. So that's the answer I will give for that. We'll see where we are in 2 years' time or 3 minutes' time.
All right, final question. What is your pizza preferences these days?
Why didn't I think of this sooner? So interesting story before that. Last time I was in America, was it last time before, I had my first deep dish pizza in Echo Park in Anaheim. And they were like, oh, it takes 45 minutes. I'm like, what? How big is this pizza? And there's a place that opened in London that we went to for my birthday last year that has started doing that. And it was amazing. But everyone I went with hated it because they were like, no, it's too much. And I was like, no, it's the best. In England, especially, there's a real culture now. Like, there's so many, like, boutique pizza places, I guess you would say, like, real thin base, crispy, kind of fancy pizzas.
Yeah, totally.
I guess. But to give, I've got a kind of couple of answers, but actually I had a pizza the other day, and the pizza that we enjoy the most at the moment is the pizza that we make ourselves. So Amy makes a really good pizza recipe, and you make dough in batches that make enough for 8 pizzas, and then we freeze it. And then when you want it, you can just unfreeze it and then you just roll it out and away you go. But at the moment, very much enjoying a pepperoni, anchovies, and then I guess jalapenos. They just like green pickles in a jar. So what's that close to? American hot with anchovies. But man, if you came and had pizza in England, I don't know. Is it? Do you get a lot of Italian pizza, like true Italian thin-based pizza where you are, or is it
in Portland? We have several. Yeah, we have several of those around here, but I don't know how common they are. Portland's a real foodie town, so I'm not sure how spread out that is. I know it's definitely it's fairly common in like New York. Obviously has its own style, but they also have that kind of wood-fired Italian thing going on. Right here in my town where I live, actually, there's a place called Mi Familia, and that was the first time I realized that pizza could be kind of gourmet and boutique. Up till then, I just was like, all pizza is good, right? And I went there for the first time. They've been open like 15 years now, I think. And that was my first experience with that Italian wood-fired style pizza. And I was like, this is a different thing. It really it, like ignited my love for good pizza.
Do you know, it's interesting because actually thinking about it, I would say it's very difficult to get a American like deep pan pizza over here. There's nowhere doing like you could get, there's this, like I said, there's this place that does deep dish and it's expensive. This is kind of an interesting thing because actually, pizza fact for you, which I'm sure you'll take away, England is the most expensive place in the world, I think, to buy a Domino's pizza.
Really?
So a small Domino's pizza over here is, I'm going to give it to you in dollars because that's probably going to blow your mind more, isn't it?
Okay.
A small, and
like
obviously a small in England
topping?
is small because, obviously you have slightly different sizes in the US. $18.
What?
Yeah.
$18?
Yeah. So I'm going to.
So now, granted, the pizza I was just referring to is smaller. They're 12-inch thin crust, so I eat a whole one myself. It's a fair bit of food, to be fair. It's not like, oh, I could easily eat 2 of those. It's a full one, and I'm full.
Yeah.
But they're like 14, and they're like it's like some bougie stuff. Like it's, they're making their own sausage. They're doing all kinds of stuff. So $18 for a Domino's is blowing my mind.
Wow,
that's crazy.
What's the most basic Domino's? Pepperoni passion?
Yeah, probably pepperoni passion.
So they come in 3 sizes or 4 sizes now. You can actually get a personal, which is like a mini one. Small
like
is 9.5
or something.
Yeah, small is 9.5, medium is 11.5, and large is 13.5. So a large pepperoni passion is £23. So that is $28.
What?
And that's before you've done anything to it. So it's really difficult to get that. So there's a lot more like, stone baked pizzas over here. But about 3 or 4 months ago, we did go to Pizza Hut and it was glorious. So I can't deny that Pizza Hut is great.
The last time I had Pizza Hut, it was not glorious. So I maybe you got it a little better over there. Yeah. Okay. So
I think it was just trashy. It was a trashy experience, and that's what I wanted.
Okay. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm just going. I'm just looking at this real quick here. It looks like Domino's for a thin crust medium 12-inch would be $7.99, so $8.
Man, I'm so glad I don't live in America for that reason. Eating a lot of Domino's pizza. So Domino's is insanely expensive over here. So yeah, we have a very, very different pizza culture.
I guess. Yeah, that's wild. Domino's is like, I guess I'll go to Domino's. That said, Domino's is a lot better than it used to be. I don't know if you remember their campaign they did in like 2012, probably. They basically, at least here, I don't know if they did this worldwide. Here, they basically did a whole ad campaign being like, we heard you. We know that our pizza sucks and we're going to make it better. And they actually did make it better. So, kudos to Domino's.
No, our Domino's adverts are very different. Very hard to explain, but I'll send you some over. I'll send you some over text.
That sounds good, man. Well, hey, we've been talking for a long time, but hopefully you have a little bit of talk left in you for Patreon. Is that going to work?
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I'll top myself up with some water and I'll come back.
All right. Sounds good. All right, everybody. For Matt, this is Blake. And as always, folks, good luck and good tones. All right. There you have it. There's another episode in the can. And don't worry if you need more of that chat. Guess where you can find it? Over on Patreon. Matt and I go, I don't know. We go for quite a bit longer. I want to say we go for like another 45 minutes. There is a lot more gear talk over there. There's a lot more random talk over there. And I think you will really enjoy it. Plus, it truly helps support the show so much. It's one of the biggest things you can do. If you've gotten any ounce of value out of this, if you think you'd like more, or if you simply just don't want to hear the ads in the middle of the episodes anymore, you can go over to patreon.com, and I promise you, it helps out so much. For $5 a month, you get access to the ad-free stream and the extra episodes. For $3 a month, you just get the ad-free episodes, which some people have found worth their time. So thank you so much for everything. Thank you for hanging out. I appreciate you. And please stay tuned to the Gun Street socials and the Tone Mob socials, because there's something really rad dropping in just a few days as this podcast is released. So thank you all so much. I appreciate you. And I will be talking to you on the internet very soon. One last thing before we totally sign off here. I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, so why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy. He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.
Hey, this is Chris Santos, host of Delirious Nomads, the Blacklight Media podcast, part of the Sound Talent Media Podcast Network. Delirious Nomads is a podcast about all things heavy metal, as well as breakdowns of your favorite combat sports. And me being a chef and all, we'll be riffing on some food talk every week with very special guests from across the globe. Listen and subscribe at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey there, I am Johnny Christ from Avenged Sevenfold, and I've got a podcast called Drinks with Johnny you're going to want to check out. I sit down with a bunch of different people from all different walks of life, from professional wrestlers to actors, comedians, fighters, musicians, everything in between. I'm just looking to make some friends and have a good time doing it. So if that sounds like something you're into, go check out Drinks with Johnny, streaming everywhere now.